Now, so we call the market value of equity. Fundamentally, is basically the present value of future cash flows, right? So that means that it's determined by first the future cash flows and second the discount rate, right? So corporate social responsibility can improve firm value by reducing the discount rates for several possible reasons. Either shareholders they require a lower rate of return, right, on the investment in the stocks because they think high CSR performing firms have lower risk, and therefore they ask for a lower return. This might have to do with future policy uncertainty, where firms are more affected by changes in ESG-related government policy, etc. Another possibility is that shareholders may ask for a lower return because they're willing to sacrifice some of the financial return in exchange for the social goods, right? So another possibility is that CSR can affect firm value through affecting the cash flows, right? So the idea is that if consumers have the preferences to consume socially responsible products, then firms that do well on CSR will also help improve consumer demand and therefore increase the revenue and the profitability. Okay, so the here is that most of the studies in the literature they examine the relationship between CSR and stock returns, right? And stock returns can be affected by both channels. So it's very hard to distinguish these two different sources of value creations in the empirical setting in general. Okay. So with these challenges in mind, in this paper, we're going to narrow down these big questions, right? And specifically, we ask whether CSR improves firm value by affecting the future cash flow of the firm, right? So we focus on the cash flow channel, and then we ask whether that CSR improve firm value by influencing consumer demand. Okay, and to try to overcome these challenges that I discussed earlier, here we're going to focus on the retail scanner data, which provides granular information both in the cross-section and in the time series. So specifically, the data that we're examining, the Nielsen retail scanner data, provides weekly product pricing, sales volume, and store location information, right? So here we have very rich information on every week how much a company sells a particular product at a particular store, okay? So this information is collected from around 30,000 participating grocery, drug, and mass merchandisers. And they cover more than half of the total US drugstore sales, 26% of the grocery store sales, and 21% of the mass merchandiser sales, right? So that hopefully provide a representative view of how local retail consumers respond to the CSR performance of the product manufacturers. So we are going to merge these retail scanner data with the financial information of the product manufacturers, right? So our sample is going to include the US public firms in the retail product markets. Specifically our sample includes close to 200 US public firms, which sells close to 100,000 different products. We have all the information at the barcode level, and specifically the data also provides a very precise definition of what type of products each barcode belongs to, right? So they have 3 layers of definition of the product categorization, so 10 departments, under which you see 120 product groups, and under which you have close to 1,400 product modules. So we have our sample period is from 2008 to 2016. And for the CSR performance, we look at a broad range of different measures. Our focus will be on the KLP databases, which provides information on the strengths and weaknesses of each firm's practices on different environmental and social issues. And we are going to focus on 5 categories of their CSR activities employee relations, community, environment, diversity, and human rights. And we are also going to have like an overall composite score of their CSR performance. And then we also will use the RedRisk database, which provides news, mainly the negative news about firms' E&S practices. So since I have a little bit of time, hopefully I can provide some more information about a little bit of the technical detail of how we conduct the analysis. So for our baseline analysis, we are going to look at, for each firm, their product sales in each county, okay, and then see whether the county level product sales has any correlation with the CSR performance of the firm. Okay, so in the regression setting, we're going to regress firms' county level product sales on the CSR performance, and we are going to include a rich set of high-dimensional fixed effects to limit the scope of omitted variables. So here's the results for our baseline analysis. So if you look at the column 1, it shows that there is a positive relationship between the CSR rating of a firm, the product manufacturers, and the county level product sales in the next year. Okay? So specifically to interpret this coefficient in column 1, if the CSR rating of the firm goes up by 1 standard deviation, then the local level dollar revenue of a product goes up by 8.8%. So I think that was missing in the bottom of the slides. Okay, and then in column 2 and 3, we look at the sales volume and the average product price. So here you see there's no correlation between CSR rating and the average price of the products, but there's a positive relationship between the CSR performance and the sales volume, right? So it seems to be that they can increase product revenue by increasing consumer demand because they buy a large quantity of the products conditional on the same product price. Okay, so column 4 and 6, I just include some control variables controlling for firm characteristics. So firm size and firm's market value, advertising effort cannot explain this result. Okay, so next we look at the subcategory of the CSR rating. So we can see what aspects of the CSR activities catch more of the attention from the consumers. So specifically, we find a significant relationship between CSR rating and product sales for the community engagement ratings, diversity ratings, and human rights ratings. Right, so these seems to be the topics that consumers care about when it comes to making their consumption decisions. But other aspects such as environmental issues does not seem to matter as much when it comes to their consumption decisions. So another interesting feature of our analysis of our empirical setting is that we have the local product sales, right? So it will provide a lot of very useful information that we cannot learn from the, for example, the revenue figure and the earnings per share from the consolidated financial statement, right? Because here we see that the variation of the sales in different counties, so we can relate our findings to the county demographics, which allows us to shed some light on what kind of consumers care more about corporate social responsibility. Okay, so specifically, we relate our results to some demographic characteristics such as their income, their political leaning, and also their education level. Right, so we add the interaction right between the CSR performance and the local demographic characteristics. And based on our analysis here, it seems to be that the relationship between CSR rating and local product sales is stronger in counties where you see more residents voting for the Democratic Party, and also counties that have a high per capita income, right? So it seems to be that is the preference to consume socially responsible products has something to do with the local consumers' income level and also their political view. So next, we try to look at consumer responses at a higher frequency. So here we measure monthly product sales. and we link that to monthly releases of negative news about the firm's E&S practices. Right, so if consumers actually care about the CSR performance of the firms when it comes to their consumption decisions, if they hear something bad, right, about the firm's E&S practices, they should respond by cutting back their consumption. And we should see a lead-lag relationship in the time series, in the sense that you should see the cutback in the consumption after the news are released, rather than the other way around. Okay, so this help us pin down the direction of the causality. Okay, so here we request the monthly product sales on the monthly releases of news before and after that month. So in the estimates here, we can see that here we have the news both in the 6 months before and the 3 months after the observed monthly product sales. And we see that the monthly product sales is negatively related to the lag news release, but not the lead news release. Right? So this is consistent with a causal relationship, meaning that let's say there's some bad news about the firm that are released in January and February, then you see a cutback in the consumer spending on their products in March. Right? But you don't see that relationship with the news release in April, because at that time in March, consumers do not know how that information is. Right? So this is consistent with the causal effect of new information about the practice performance of the firm's CSR, which affects consumers' decision on what products to buy. So lastly, we try to relate consumers' behavior to the attention that they pay to ESG issues. Right? So the idea here is we are going to utilize some environmental disasters that happen near the consumer markets. So the idea is, if there's a tornado that happened in the city very close to you, then you hear about the news, then you start thinking more about the environmental issues and maybe be more conscious in your consumption decision, and maybe try to buy products that you consider as more environmental friendly. Okay, so the important feature of this empirical setting is that this environmental disaster by itself has nothing to do with the perception of the firm's policy or the quality of the products, right? It's just that the disasters affect consumers' attention and therefore affect their consumption behavior, right? So we are going to conduct an difference in differences analysis and consider the counties that are having a environmental disaster not directly hitting them, but happening nearby as the ones that are affected by the events. And then we look at the consumer market that are located further away from the environmental disaster as the control group, right? So the ones that are located closer to the events are the ones that have a larger attention shock, right, by this disaster, and therefore they're more affected in terms of their consumption behavior. So this is the regression setting. So again, we focus on monthly product sales. So in order to look at a more timely consumer response to these events, and look at how they behave if there's a disaster that happened within 500 miles in the past 12 months, how they behave differently from the other consumers. So because we focus on the environmental disaster, right? So naturally you would expect that consumers will pay more attention to the environmental externalities of the products that they are consuming. And this is exactly what we find. So if we look at the column 2 estimates, you will see that local product sales becomes more sensitive to the environmental ratings of the company that manufactures a product after this nearby environmental disasters. And we also find an increase in the sensitivity for the community rating. And our understanding is that maybe consumers also start thinking about whether the firms have contributed to the recovery of the local communities that are affected by the environmental disasters. Right? So by contrast, we do not see an increased sensitivity of the other aspect of the CSR. So that seems to be consistent with what you would expect, right? Consumers to change in their consumption behaviors in response to environmental disasters. But in terms of the timing, we also find something interesting. That is, it seems to be that this attention induced by the environmental disasters also have a pretty short life, right? So the idea is, so what we find in our analysis is that this heightened sensitivity of consumer spending on in response to the firm CSR performance only lasts for 3 quarters. Right, so what it means is that when there's a tornado that happened in the neighboring county, then you start thinking about, okay, maybe I should be more concerned about how I spend, how I buy different products that may have different environmental externalities. But after a year, you forget about it, and then you start behaving, the same way as before, right? So this probably just tell us, how the horizon of this effect that can be induced by this particular shock that we're studying. But I think the deeper idea here is that consumer behavior also, to a very large extent, are shaped by their awareness of ESG issues, right? So that could be primed by some ad hoc incidents that might happen that catch their attention, or it could be driven by some other more long-term influences such as education and so on, right? But here it seems to be consistent with the idea that environmental disasters only induce a short attention span, right? When it comes to affecting consumers' spending decisions. So overall, what's the key takeaway from our study? Well, we think that our evidence suggests that overall, consumers do seem to care about corporate social responsibilities when it comes to their spending decisions. And in particular, we see that how much consumers care about it depends on their political view and also depends on their income level, right? So not every consumer is the same. Okay? And also, the response to new information that they learn. Okay, so we see the response to the ESG news that are publicized, and also their response depends on how much attention that they derive to the related issues, right? And overall, it's shaped by their awareness and their concerns about the ESG issues that are related to the product that they're consuming. So these are the insight that we thought we could share with you from our analysis so far. So looking forward to the feedback.
Thank you very much. And to my knowledge, we don't have Ling, Metin, and Suraj. Ling is virtual. Oh, they're virtual. Yes. Okay, so please go. So we will now talking on pricing and producing green products under subsidy regulation.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah, could you please make me the host so I can share the screen?
Ling, if you're ready, you can go ahead and begin your presentation.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, I can share now. So can you still see my slides? Okay, can you see my slides clearly? If that's okay.
We can't hear you on our end.
Yeah, I just shared. Can you see?
Microphone, because I see that you are unmuted.
Mm-hmm. Can you share again? So can you see my slides right now? Hey, excuse me, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for attending this talk. Today, I'm glad to present the research on pricing and producing green products under subsidy termination and competition. This is a co-work with Professor Meeting and Professor Sarish. So I hope you can see the slides clearly. Sorry, I cannot join in person. Okay, so the main motivation to start this research is the concern about environment and sustainability, which is also one of the important reasons why we gather together in this conference. It is reported that transportation sector attributes to the largest portion of greenhouse gas emissions in United States, around 29% in 2019. Globally, transportation sector also accounts for a large proportion. So we should pursue transportation sustainability, and electric vehicle is recognized as one of the most realistic ways. To mitigate climate change and approach net zero emissions, more than 20 countries all over the world have announced the full phase-out of internal combustion engine vehicles over the next 10 to 30 years. The governments also provide several subsidy programs to promote electric vehicles. And it is reported that the government spent a total amount of 40 billion in 2020 to support e-waste. This amount is annulled, but we also found in this figure, there is a downward trend for the government spending over the consumer spending, roughly decreasing from 20% in 2015 to 10% in 2020. So following this trend, we could also expect the subsidy will phase out in the near future. Actually, it's a common sense that subsidy will not last forever and will phase out sooner or later. So it's very important to consider the manufacturer's response under the subsidy termination context. And also, it's important for the government to design the policy, consider the manufacturer's response. So the example here we said is there is a tax credit in the United States to electric vehicles for customers who purchase it. And this subsidy will terminate in 2023. Actually, before this, there is a sales cap of 200,000 electric vehicles for each manufacturer. That means for each manufacturer who sold the electric vehicle of 200,000 quantity will phase out the subsidy for the manufacturer. So that gives us an opportunity to observe what happened in industry when the subsidy terminates for the manufacturers. Another example is the tax credit for solar panel system. This subsidy will terminate in 2035. So as we say, before going to theoretic model, we want to see what happens in industry, especially will the manufacturer increase or decrease the price after subsidy termination. And for the opportunity of the sales cap policy, by the end of 2018, Tesla and General Motors hits the cap and the subsidy tends to phase out for these two manufacturers. And we actually found in January 2019, Tesla announced it will cut the price after the subsidy terminates. On the contrary, General Motors announced a few months later it will not decrease the price. So this inconsistent clues from industry make our problems even more challenging and impactful. Now we formally introduce our research question, which we are interested to analyze the government and manufacturers' decisions when incorporating the interplay among subsidy termination, learning by doing, and competition. Our research questions are specified in the following. First, what are the optimal prices before and after subsidy termination? And in particular, we care about whether the manufacturer decrease or increase the price over periods. We also want to study how should the government terminate the subsidy Besides the subsidy amount, whether the manufacturer subsidizes the all sales policy or the qualified sales rule. So the qualified sales means the sales delivered before the subsidy termination. And then we also want to study the impact of learning by doing in the presence of subsidy, whether it provides something new insight compared to the traditional literature. And we are also curious about the problem under competition when there are two manufacturers. So in order to answer these questions, we model a two-period Sternberger game where the manufacturer is the leader and the government is the leader and the manufacturer is the follower. For the time limit, I will not go to details about the model, but for a brief start, the government first announced the subsidy amount and the termination rule, and then the manufacturer decides the price and production quantity in each period. So this is the optimal solution under qualified sales rule. For qualified sales rule, which just means the government will only subsidize the sales that delivered before subsidy termination. And here we specifically want to know what's the impact of learning rate. As expected, the price in both periods decrease in the learning rate. What does this mean? This basically means as the learning rate increase, the cost in the second period will decrease, so the manufacturer can price lower in both periods. We would also expect the production quantity in the first period to increase in the learning rate as modeled in the previous literature. However, we found actually the first period production quantity decrease in the learning rate. This is because besides the direct impact of learning rate in the production quantity, there is also indirect impact from the consumer subsidy. As the consumer subsidy will decrease in the learning rate, it drops by the production quantity in the first period. Then we can similarly solve the problem under all sales rule. That means the government will subsidize all the sales in the first period, and these sales can be delivered in the second period. So now we try to answer our main research question. First, whether the manufacturer will increase or decrease the price over periods. Based on our results, we found the manufacturer will decrease the price over periods, but will not fully compensate the consumer subsidy. Actually, the manufacturer adopts a sandwich pricing policy. That means the second period price is lower than the first period price, but more than the first period effective price. In this sense, the subsidy will benefit the early adopter for the effective price. And then we want to know whether the government will adopt the qualified sales rule or the all sales rule. So here we found that the government spends less total subsidy expenditure under qualified sales rule. From the perspective of minimizing expenditure, that means the government should implement the qualified sales rule, which means only subsidize the sales delivered before subsidy termination. And these insights actually supported by the US government action, which requires the electric vehicle to be in service in order to qualify for the tax credit. And we also explore this problem under competition, but for the time limit, I will not go to more detail, but just one more insight that shows actually the total adoption of two manufacturers is submodular in the consumer subsidy and competition intensity. What does this mean? Basically, this means when the total adoption increase in the consumer subsidy, the increase rate decrease in the competition intensity. So basically means when the competition intensity is high, the government is possible to provide a lower consumer subsidy to achieve the same adoption target. In this sense, we say competition is a substitute for the subsidy. So the government can promote competition through the ways of such as promotes open patent or reduce the patent term to promote competition and then in turn provide a lower subsidy. So that's the main results and insights in our paper. For anyone interested, we're happy to take your question at the end, and the paper is also online. So if you are interested, you can look at the paper for details. For summary, we model a Steinberg-Nash game to study the problem between the government and the manufacturer, and we obtain the optimal pricing and consumer subsidy policy as well as the subsidy termination rule. We also found that the manufacturer prefers the sandwich pricing strategy, and the government would like to implement qualified sales rule. We also explore this problem under computation, and we have further insights for individual and group learning, which we will not detail in here. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Now we will move to our third presenters that just flew from Poland, Justyna Majewska and Szymon Skolaski, and they will present environmental friendly behavior in tourism in Poland following COVID-19, assessment of demand and its determinants using agent-based modeling.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. On behalf of myself and my colleagues from the Boston University of Economics and Business, I would like to present our study, which is on the environmental behavior of tourists and its determinants. And this is on the base of agent-based modeling, which is multi-agent simulation. And we conducted our study and survey on a specific group of tourists, which are cyclists, because they are perceived as this kind of group which is very aware of the environmental friendly aspects. For example, due to the transportation, nature of transportation choice. So our motivation, so quick. Yeah. Yeah, our motivation is a result of the trend of environmental friendly behavior after the COVID pandemic, which is not so visible yet in the statistics. So we were looking for the method in order to identify and evaluate this phenomenon, which is quite new, but there is the absence of the extensive databases. So this is why we are looking to the possibility of using this agent-based modeling, which could bring us with much more data that we can create in some way, which we explain further. The main goal of this study is to identify the rules and patterns of tourist behavior and also this determinants for environmental behavior. This is stimulated by COVID-19 because we previously observed this pro-environmental friendly behavior in tourist destinations as well. But after this COVID pandemic, we can observe a new wave of changing the behavior or the perception of the situation, both from the customers or the tourists and also the tourist fields. And from the methodological point of view, we try to determine the possibility of using agent-based modeling for this kind of simulation. So we think the situation that there is lack of sufficient data on this new phenomenon. Yes, so within this method, we create artificial world with virtual agents, each of which has its own objective function and all the characteristics like personal demography and susceptibility to external factors. And these all features create the conditions for this decision-making process. So the essence of this research is to take into consideration the interrelation between the tourists, but also between the tourists as the actors in our model and the environment. And how it works, explain Simon.
Okay, hello. Can I get the next slide, please? All right. Well, I don't know if I should go very deep into the methodology or rather shallow. All right. So we started our research with a survey. The survey of cyclists. We got about 500 respondents, and we asked them about behavior, about motivation to choose bikes and not other means of transportations. Do they connect with other cyclists? Are they susceptible to opinions of other cyclists and so on? Based on this survey, we created a classification using the methodology of hierarchical classification, and the goal of this classification is, as always, to make concise groups. That is, to make groups of respondents who are similar within a group, and this similar and across the groups. You can see. You can see the classification results here. You can see that we arrived at 5 final nodes. Final nodes are final groups, and we dubbed these groups as commuter cyclists, cyclotourism, and bikepackers, and so on. I think that the names are quite straightforward. Maybe apart the utility cyclists. Utility cyclists are people who use bikes to do their errands, to go to the shop, to go to visit friends, and so on. The numbers in brackets are the structure of the population surveyed by this. This is the last step of the simulation, not the first, but the last. Our simulation starts completely randomly. That is, we created 2,000 virtual respondents to our tourist survey. And we can move forward. 2,000 artificial respondents, and each respondent gets random answers to the questions of the survey, and a place in the world. The place in the simulation. We used a model of the world which is called the small world. This is the most common word used in social sciences. It can be graphically shown as a circle where dots are agents, and you can see that each agent can connect with their neighbors. These neighbors, the closest neighbors, represent a group of friends, family, and so on. But from time to time, there is a certain possibility, certain probability to that. Agents can connect with someone they didn't previously knew. the connection between the agents means that they are assigned a role in the interaction. There are three types of roles here. One is that an agent can be three types. All right. So one role is to be an influencer. That means that the agent who was chosen to be an influencer impose their beliefs on other agent, and the other agent role is called influencee. I think that the such word does not exist, but influencee is a person who was influenced by an influencer, and the third role is to be inactive and to do nothing, to connect with no one. This kind of interactions happen 200 times because each simulation is a series of iterations. So we had like 2,000 agents meeting neighbors, meeting other agents like 200 times, and we wanted to set the function or to set the parameters of the function to recreate the final structure of our society, like which started randomly, to represent or to converge to the final structure, which was taken from the zoo. There are six types of interaction. It's like peer influence, social learning, role models and opinion leaders, community engagement, and interpersonal communications. But finally, we group them into three groups. Injunctive. Can I get the next slide, please? Injunctive means that people behave as they believe they are supposed to believe. And descriptive norms means that people try to copy other people. They observe other people, and they start doing the same. And this connected to the nature. Well, the name is maybe not the best here, but it refers to intrinsic values. Remember, we were thinking about cyclists. Cyclists are pro-environmentalist community, so they often behave pro-environmentally friendly because they feel that they are a part of nature. So this is why we call this connect us to the nature. The numbers you can see are is the importance of these kind of interactions. So this connected of the nature is the most important, following by injunctive and then descriptive. That means that intentions to reduce carbon footprint are basically not a case of something what other people can impose on us. That means that people can think about reducing carbon footprint if they want that, if they believe it's necessary, and if not, they don't. There is a part of people who can start behaving pro-environmentally friendly because of their peers. Well, there is a very well-known case from Canada that people started segregated trash because they saw that their neighbors did it. But actually, we didn't find such strength of these interactions here. So what it really means is that if we want we as let's say members of society, if we want to impose or to somehow make people, maybe not make, but enhance pro-environmental behavior, this shouldn't be made by peers, but other people. showing good examples, but by governmental or regional authorities, and maybe some laws, and they are things which are more connected with creating this intrinsic values of being for environmental friendly. Let's say at schools or during the education. But there is a serious weakness of our research that I need like 50 seconds to say that this is our first approach to this topic, and we had to skip this governmental and regional authorities influence in this research. So this is the avenue for further research. I think close. I think this is all from us. Thank you for that.
Okay, so thank you so much. We will move now to consumer response to climate change, wildfire smoke, and sustainable product just in California. That will be presented by Tao. So this is our last presenter for today. And then after that, we will move to roundtable discussions, paper discussions.
Sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teo Lin, and I'm a third-year marketing PhD student in BTE. Right, so today I'm going to present consumer response to climate change, wildfire smoke, and sustainable product choice in California. All right, so climate change has been one of the most important social issues nowadays, and because of the climate change, we have seen that the frequency and intensity of climate change events have been increasing recently. So, for example, if we see the bottom figure, we can see that 15 out of top 20 most destructive wildfire has occurred since 2010. So, yes, the wildfire and climate change events have been with us for a long time, but it is quite recent that it received a broad attention from the public. And interestingly, we checked that wildfire smokes can transfer over a long distance. So the recent literature found that the exposure to wildfire smoke is it too long? The recent literature found that exposure to wildfire smoke can affect the human health condition, and it can also change the human behavior too. However, as far as I know, and at least in the marketing literature, we couldn't find any paper that directly and empirically investigating how climate change events can affect the consumer's purchasing behavior. So using the 2018 Camp Fire as the focal climate change event in our study, we investigate whether wildfire smokes can change consumer purchasing behavior of sustainable products, and if it does, whether they change their behavior gradually or like immediate after the exposure. Right. So when we initiated this project, like a lot of people actually asked me, "Oh, why you use like wildfire smokes, not something else like hurricanes or floods?" So the reason is because first of all, like unlike the flooding or like hurricanes, wildfire smoke doesn't really affect the supply side, so it's an external demand shock. And what I mean here is that the floodings and the hurricanes tend to destroy the vast areas such that supply chains and stores tend to get destroyed or even like closed temporarily. But the store's operations are not really related to the wildfire smokes. So it really helped us to isolate the effect of climate change events on the demand side only. And secondly, the severity of wildfire smokes can be quantified by the particulate matter 2.5 data from US EPA. And we find that like multiple studies focusing on the wildfire smokes use this data. And lastly, the dispersion of wildfire smoke is exogenous to consumer purchasing behavior. And this is because where the haze of the smokes land really depends on the fire intensity, the geographical feature, and also the meteorological condition at the time of the fire. So this gives us exogenous variation of wildfire smoke level across the multiple counties. So using this variation and the EPA standard that PM level greater than 55 is unhealthy for general population, we define store affected by severe wildfire smoke as the treatment effect, and the other store as the control group. Okay, so in this figure, this figure represents the average PM level around, the average PM level of treatment and control group throughout our sample period, which is 6 months before and after the Camp Fire. So here the vertical dotted line represent the first week of our post period when the multiple counties are affected by the severe wildfire smokes. And the red and green lines indicates the average PM level of treatment and control group respectively. So here we can see the trends are actually very similar, and the average PM level is always below 25. But at the time of the exposure, we can see that the average PM level of the treatment group suddenly jumps up to 100. And to understand this better, we present the average PM level, the weekly average PM level of each county 2 weeks before, during, and 2 weeks after the exposure. And here the counties without any color are excluded from our sample data because they are affected by the evacuation orders or because we don't have the PM data. So there are several things to mention here. The first of all, even though some areas like San Francisco is really quite a distance from the Camp Fire, but we can see that they are heavily affected by the smoke. And secondly, we can see that the severity of wildfire smokes differ across multiple counties. And lastly, the air quality comes back to normal after the 2 weeks. Right, so using this data, we try to estimate the treatment's effects through the BID and through a fixed effects model. So here, the dependent variable is the market share of sustainable digital products. And the third variable indicates the stores severely affected by the smoke, the campfire smoke. And lastly, the post variable indicates the time during and after the week of the exposure. And before showing the result, here is the trend of average market share of two groups. So firstly, we can see that the trend is quite similar, but after the exposure, we can see that average market share for the 3 months group increased over time, but that for the control group doesn't really change much. Right, so the estimation result of two models is presented in column 1 and 2. And we can see that the 3-month effect is about like 0.073, and these results imply that the exposure to wildfire smoke can lead to increasing market share by 3.7 percentage points. And instead of market share, we tried to use the sales volume of sustainable and non-sustainable products as the dependent variable. And we find that the effects are positive and significant for the sales volume of sustainable products, but the effects were negative for the non-sustainable products. So these results imply that consumers actually substitute between these two types of products. And we additionally conduct an event study. So here, the estimated coefficients represent the difference between two groups relative to the month before the exposure. And here we can see that the coefficients in the gray periods are insignificant. So it helped us to relieve the parallel trend concern. And after the exposure, we can see that the effects are actually gradually increasing over time. So these results imply that consumers actually change their behavior gradually rather than like immediately. So this tells us the wildfire smoke is a gentle nudge. And we think this result is because it takes some time for consumers to change their behavior because of the brand loyalty or some stickiness in behavior. Right, so in conclusion, our study is first one directly and empirically investigating how consumers respond to the climate change events. And we have seen that the wildfire smokes can increase the market share, and then consumers change their behavior gradually. And lastly, we have multiple implications. So for example, we help us managers to understand how consumers actually respond to the climate change events by using the wildfire smokes. And we further incentivize firms to invest more in sustainable products. All right, so this is the end of the presentation, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Any questions from the audience or from online participants? We have one question.
Just a quick question for you. How did you measure sustainable products? What's out there as a measurement?
I think that's a really great question. And I actually dropped that detail because the presentation has to be like 10 minutes. So how we define the sustainable products. So we choose the digital products because it has the most number of so sustainable products, we define products with the Safer Choice certificate, which is sustainability certificate by the US EPA. And we found, and we also used, we then use the digital as the main products because the digital category has the most number of products with the US EPA Safer Choice certificate and has the most market share.
Do we have one more question?
Just in the interest of finding out a little bit more, could you turn the slides back? Could you go backwards? I want to see the chart to the books of Bellin. And if you look at that one, what would happen? There's no way I can do this. And what would happen if we just started this whole thing right here at point 3? Because then it doesn't look the same. And your conclusion includes that it takes time, okay? Not gradually rather than immediately. So if the chart had started, do you have a pointer? No, I don't have a pointer. Yeah, if it started at point 3, looking from point 3 on. Point 1, 3, on 4, or what, on 5, on 6. That's a different chart. And that chart doesn't show what your paper shows at all. To me, it may be that things change over time and consumers do different ways, but it's not to the wildfire. It doesn't really have to do with wildfire, because if you just look at, it depends on how you look at the chart.
Okay, so I encourage then private one-to-one discussions, and now we need to move to our roundtable discussions and presentations. So okay, thank you very much.
Okay, roundtable 1, John, raise your hand. So anyone interested in joining roundtable 1 over there? Roundtable 2 and 3, the chairs are online, right? So we'll just make it roundtable 2 here. Anyone interested in joining roundtable 2 here? And this empty table, roundtable 3. Anyone interested in joining roundtable 3 there? That way, very easy. Right? Go ahead. Thanks very much for sticking around. If you're not interested in roundtables, conference is over for today. Do please come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Bro, you keep breaking stuff, dog. Yeah, there's a snowball. Is that a bike? No, we're good. Kind of ironic that I'm the tech guy and I'm like breaking.
So the screen is not working for your round table. The screen, the master screen, each round table has a different link. As long as you're sharing screen at each round table, you're good. Right.
How is it that I can capitalize on I have learned. You're back. I see. I've heard of it. It's never around. Yeah. How about you? Canada. So what are we doing? Why not? Sure. Chinese erasure. Chandra. You got a long term. I like it so much. Oh, sure, sure, sure. Sure.
So you will see that actually that's
Correct, I just took the. Yeah, we'll just do the same thing, so we'll just. We didn't meet before. Yeah, look, it's 30. No, the long cable is underneath, yeah.
Oh, we don't need it today. No. We can unplug it. You can connect to viewers.
Yeah, we could just get rid of it because it's just route. All right.
I think we have to go to class after this. I wouldn't be done.